All right, so here is the big update in the case of Julie Doe. But before we get to the update, I'm going to just rewind a little bit, give you guys some of the basics on it. On September 25th, 1988, a man stopped to the side of County Road 474 in Florida. He was looking to salvage some wood to build patio furniture. He stumbled upon mummified human remains. The authorities were called to the area and they began trying to make sense of what was before them. Their first observation was that, judging by the manner of dress, that the victim was a woman. The Jane Doe would be entered into databases as such, and in a time when male, female, or unknown were the only options listed in many of these databases. It wouldn't be until 2015 that this incorrect assumption was corrected. DNA analysis would conclude that Julie Doe was a transgender woman and reassignment surgeries were far less common back then. This meant that it would have been really helpful information if they could have figured it out at the time, because they could have gone looking for medical records to match the surgeries that they were seeing on this victim. However, with that discovery happening decades later, all those helpful records were essentially long gone. So Jane Doe received a new, much more detailed facial reconstruction. And after giving the victim a new face, they also thought we should give her a new nickname. So they looked for some inspiration from this film right here. To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, starring Patrick Swayze, Wesley Snipes, and John Leguizamo. And now she would be referred to as Julie Doe going forward. The episode of Seriously Mysterious goes into a lot more than I covered in this, and it was expertly researched by Gwen Barringer. I'll have a link to that episode in the description box down below so you can check that out. But who is Julie Doe? What happened to her? Well, thanks to the hard work of so many, we can now answer at least one of those questions. So let's do that here. Over at DNA Doe Project, who I was at AdvocacyCon and was able to watch their presentation. They gave an excellent presentation on their process, some of the challenges they face. But at their website, we can now see identified. And as a matter of fact, they've got it listed as a success story. Let's get some details here. After more than 36 years, Pamela Lee Walton has been identified through investigative genetic genealogy by the DNA Doe Project. And here we have a picture of Pamela. In 2019, the Lake County Sheriff's Office reached out to the DNA Doe Project to try investigative genetic genealogy. They connected with volunteers who were also part of an initiative called the Trans Doe Task Force, who began the work on the case before leaving to focus full-time on that group. It would take 5 years of diligence and persistence by a team of expert volunteers to narrow Pamela's family tree to the correct branch to find her name. The team faced just about every possible hurdle, from unknown parentage, matches who were adopted, to endogamy. That is a term that actually came up in the presentation they gave, and I didn't understand what it was when I first heard it. Essentially, it just means that sometimes marriages are by people that are too genetically close. We can say, like in some cases, maybe even family members. So that throws off geneticists when they're trying to process this information. And of course, in this particular case, they would come to find out that Pamela had also been adopted, which certainly makes things tough. Even up to the end, when we suspected that she was adopted, the team was stuck. Adoption records, of course, not accessible to genetic genealogists. And Pamela had been adopted at the age of 5. But they did find that Pamela, or the Doe that they were working with at that time, had strong family ties in Kentucky. They just didn't know if she was born there or if she ever lived there, said Lance Daly. Daly? I think it's Daly, even though there's no I. Lance Daly, investigative genetic genealogist. Pamela had grown up with her adopted family in Kentucky and had officially changed her name before she was in her mid-20s, likely around the time she underwent sex reassignment surgery and therapy. Pamela's story includes many common themes that trans people face, said Pam Lawrenson, the executive director of Media and Communications, from derogatory notations left in high school yearbooks about her to a headstone pre-carved with her former male name. Gwen wrote this really special piece in the episode about dead naming, explaining what that was as well. It's heartbreaking to know that the community was not willing to accept her and the identity that she chose. There's another thing that sticks out to me about all this, and it's noted down here. When they conducted the original autopsy back in 1988, they saw that she had previously fractured cheekbone, broken nose, and a healed rib fracture. This poor woman went through all kinds of things in this life, in this short life that she lived, trying to be herself, unfortunately. And it also just makes me wonder, sometimes you'll hear about injuries of that nature in relation to domestic violence. It just makes me wonder, is there a component to that here? Is there someone that she was seeing long-term or dating? Is it intimate partner violence in some way? Ultimately, in the end, they would be able to use genealogy research to resolve the case. So we now know who Pamela Walton is. What about what happened to her? And here we have an article at WHAS11.com that when I saw this title, I was like, excellent, here we go. Kentucky woman's 1988 murder case finally solved after 36 years. Unfortunately, they're not talking about the murder actually being solved. They're just saying that the identity has been figured out. It's an unfortunate title, I think. We've used WHS 11 as a source numerous times. They're not the type to go really looking for attention with their titles. So I think this is just unfortunately worded. No conclusion there. As a matter of fact, I went to advocate.com and did a quick look to find just a quote of where things were going with that part of the investigation. And they're saying the manner of her death remains unknown, and the sheriff's staff is continuing to investigate, with members of the public asked to share any information that they may have. So that is the update. And I'm thankful that Pamela is now known. I hope that that tombstone might be corrected at some point. And I really hope that justice arrives in this case. And thanks for joining me here today.